Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order tonight's Council and Committee budget meeting. The 2021 Water Sewer Budget. How about I do that all over again? Okay, go ahead. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Council and Committee's 2021 budget meeting for the Water and Sewer proposed budget. Tonight we'll be starting with a presentation from Alicia Keating, and then we'll move forward through to some resolutions and questions from Council. Alicia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I will get right into it. I'll take my mask off. Okay, so some of the highlights for the 2021 budget for water and sewer. Our revenue consumption is projected to be up, resulting in additional revenue of 4.1%. We have operating expenses that are in line with council-approved guidelines. Capital meets all targets from our long-term financial plan for infrastructure renewal. And there is a focus on planning for consumption in future years. Construction in future years. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Some efficiencies and savings, as well as process improvements that we have seen in the Water and Sewer Fund. We continue to maintain staffing levels that are similar to 1995. We're leveraging technology. The equipment utilization project continues to produce savings. We have elimination of 2 large pieces of equipment, which results in maintenance and capital savings. We're sharing some snow removal duties with facilities in parks and trees, as well as water and sewer. And water and sewer engineering, parks and trees, and roadway operations all meet regularly to discuss the 5-year capital construction plan and ensure that everything is aligned there and as efficient as possible. Some cumulative budget savings that the Water and Sewer Fund has produced. They've saved over 11% within the fund, which has enabled the city to invest more in capital, resulting in a reduction in some of that infrastructure deficit number. Just to walk through the Water and Sewer funding summary, how we essentially pay for all the things within the Water and Sewer Fund. User fees do pay for the ongoing operating, maintenance, and infrastructure renewal. We do have some rate increases over the past few years, which we've used solely for infrastructure renewal. We've leveraged other levels of government funding to address the infrastructure deficit, primarily gas tax funding. And we've also seeked and got some additional funding from other levels of government to address some of our water quality standards, and has funded the wastewater treatment plant upgrades for the last few phases. The rates for our typical users, essentially what it breaks down to is an average rate for a residential customer of $840 annually. That is billed quarterly, and I will jump to the punchline, but because of the additional consumption and the additional connections, we are not recommending a water and sewer rate increase in 2021. Due to the situation surrounding COVID, as well as the ability to fund some of our construction, we are able to maintain that rate, we feel, for 2021.
Councilor McDermott, you have a question?
I do, thank you. Look, Alicia, I'm really glad to see that. I was thinking about it before the meeting, that there isn't a rate increase this year. You cite the 4.1% increase in usage through consumption, partly due to new connections. In the absence of having that increase, does that have any effect? And I may have my things in the wrong boxes, infrastructure deficit. So I'm just curious in terms of how that goes. Does it have any impact on addressing our infrastructure deficit in the water and sewer area?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the infrastructure deficit is quite fluid, depending on how much you invest, no pun intended. We have been very fortunate within the last few years to actually invest more than the recommended 90%. So because we're investing at a quicker rate, than the long-term financial plan had originally assessed it to be. It is coming down somewhat quicker. One of the things that we've also done during this year is we've compared our GIS system to our actual accounting system, and we've matched them up, and we actually found that we were accounting for more pipe than we actually had in the ground. So by doing that, that also reduced the infrastructure deficit number, which allows us to again reassess that. And we will be looking at rate recommendations going forward and what that looks like. But we're quite comfortable that for 2021, we don't need it right now, and we will reassess. So just to compare us to other...
Sorry, Councillor Chase, did you have your hand up? Button, please.
Sorry. Yes, I do. And I was going to save it until the summary, and I don't mind waiting until the summary page, but I think it's along the lines of, what Councillor McDermott noted. In the summary, we say we have a significant deficit. And, that to me, begs some kind of a solution. So that's what I'm looking for is I'm getting a bit confused. I say that everything is great. We keep the rate, where it is, but we have a significant deficit. So can you maybe explain that so
Sure.
I can get it? Thank you.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair. Basically what it is we have a plan for how much money we can invest each and every year. The water and sewer fund and the general fund are connected very closely as far as a lot of the piping being in the ground. So if we don't have sufficient funding in the general fund, it somewhat keeps us from investing more in the water and sewer fund. So because of the levels that we're investing in the water and sewer fund planned for 2021, and our ability to fund some of those construction projects through the general fund as well, we feel quite comfortable that we're still addressing the infrastructure deficit that we do have by the investment that we're making in 2021, given that revenues are increasing by 4.1%. Typically, we would aim for a 5% revenue increase. But due to the fact that we have found efficiencies and we're able to invest more quickly into our infrastructure, we feel that the 4.1% revenue will be sufficient to allow us to address the infrastructure deficit, keep the rates stable during this time, and to keep working towards that.
Thank you.
So just to compare the Fredericton water and sewer rates to some other municipalities, Fredericton does continue to have the lowest rates when compared to Moncton, St. John, and we've also added Dieppe and New Maryland as they have kind of similar situations there for water and sewer funds. So we are quite proud of that fact, that we do have a great system and we do produce great quality water, and we charge the rates to do so. Looking at the proposed revenue, it is overall a 3.9% increase. That primarily deals with some of the second year surplus as well as the connection fees remaining the same or lower. What you will notice though is the percentage change in the increase is primarily residential. So with people working from home, as opposed to working in office buildings, and some of the commercial properties would have been shut down for a period of time. That is not surprising that we're seeing that increase in the residential consumption. One thing that I would like to discuss with you as council this evening is some of the financial pressures we're seeing due to COVID. Mr. Chair. Okay. So we do realize that there are many customers and businesses that are impacted by COVID-19 that are within city limits. As a city, we are fully committed to working with the property owners to find solutions that work financially for both sides of the coin. But we do need to collect our revenue in order to operate the utility. We do have bills to pay on our own, and we need that cash flow to be able to do that. The utility is 100% self-funded, other than some of the funding that comes in for the capital. But overall, that cash flow is very important. We currently have approximately 1,000 customers that would typically be in our shut-off position. This means that they're well over 90 days past due on their bills, and have not contacted us at all to make payment arrangements. So because of that, we are recommending that we start the shut-off process. We did stop that in March due to the pandemic. And as a result of that, there have been a number of customers, I guess, that have decided that we're not a priority to pay the bill. So ideally, what we're recommending is that property owners would receive a notice that we will indeed be shutting off their water if they do not make payment arrangements. And we will give them a period of time to contact us to make those arrangements. One of the things I would like to add, each quarter we do have kind of our frequent flyers that typically just don't pay their bills. So they get their shut-off notice and immediately come in and pay. So we're hoping that's the situation. But each and every time they have received a bill, most people would have received at least 2 bills by now. There has been contact information put in there that says, please contact us. We're more than happy to work with you. But again, only 17 out of those 1,000 essentially have called to make arrangements with us. St. John just recently passed a motion to do this. So we're intending to do that. And I wanted to make council aware.
Councillor Grandy.
Yeah,
Then,
thank you.
Sorry, and then Councillor Mallet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Alicia. And first of all, I know there's more here and some good stuff coming up as far as what we have to do in infrastructure renewal. I do want to compliment Dylan and his group for what they've done over the number of years. When we started process improvement, Lean Six, that whole group has really stepped forward to set an example for the rest of the corporation. And I think the people of Fredericton should be happy and glad that our utility is taking the steps it is to save funds and pressures that would normally have been put on them through rate increase to substantiate that. So good work, Dylan, and pass it on to your group. As far as this goes, this is a hard one, right? It very much is. So my first question to you is those ones that you referred to, how many normally is that we don't get them normally that are deficient or delinquent on an average? Just
Through you, Mr. Chair, on a weekly basis, probably anywhere between 20 and 30 would be the typical same group of people.
Mm-hmm.
There might be 1 or 2 that someone just forgot to pay the bill or actually did have financial difficulties.
Mm-hmm.
We have been trying to contact all of these people by phone as well as by mail. And there's very few that are answering our phone calls. Personally, I don't know if this is true, but I do feel people think that the water is not going to get shut off during a pandemic. So I'm going to keep the money in my pocket.
Yeah. Like this 1,000 that you're talking about, what period is that from March until now?
Yeah, for the most part, that would be 90 plus days. So at least 30 days.
So give me a 90
or
plus,
at least 3 months.
give me a 3 months average of normal. So that'd be about 60 normally, 60 to 100, would you say?
Through you, Mr. Chair, roughly, yes.
Okay. All right. I don't have any issue with you giving the notice, but I do think the notice it would be very interesting to understand people's situation in this realm. It's not just, should we shut off your water, give us a phone call. The way you propagate your message is always good. I know that, I've seen them in my, not in my house that way, but I've seen the messages. But what I would like to know is kind of maybe it allows us to get a little more feedback, and maybe communications can come up with something that, where we indicate that we are going to shut off your water because you're not paying, and you need to contact us. But if you have situations that really are challenging due to COVID, and you need to come and explain it to us so that we understand and we can make better decisions on the value of shut off versus not shutting off or whatever. My concern is I just don't want to go randomly out and shut water off to people for not paying. I understand the reasons we have to do it, and I agree. But I want to make sure we touch the base to make sure if given them the opportunity to explain it to us. And I know you've said you've done two bills and 2 notices, but I would really like to make sure that we have a communication to them as we're telling them we're going to shut off their water, that you really need to sit down with us and tell us your situation so we can, make sure we take into account the situation that they may be under financially. And then, maybe bring it back to finance and we can, talk about those numbers again. But that's just what I would like to see. Thank you for the time, Mr. Chair.
I might take a moment to point out how complicated it is for a municipality to determine financial need without any of the levers that are used to determine that, because they're all provincial.
I understand,
Right.
but it's
So
like a
it's,
survey. I'd really like to understand.
Right. But it would be tough to.
But that's our call. We're governors. Well,
This will be discussed later, I guess, when the information comes back to council. I next have on the list Councillor Melee, then McDermott, then Chase.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Councillor Grandy. I'm sure there's, out of the 1,000, there's people taking advantage of the system. That being said, last few months were really tough on a lot of people, and I'm sure right, because it's not normal, right? So I'm sure there's a higher percentage of that just can't pay it. And I could see, right, that some people, it's hard to have that discussion. So that might be why we're not getting any of the replies. So I'd be real hesitant because we're still in the middle of it. There's still a lot of people affected. I'd be hesitant to pass that resolution and question, Mr. Chair.
There's no resolution on the floor regarding this. This is a point of information.
So that's kind of what I'm wondering, because it was mentioned about the St. John passed a resolution. So we don't need to pass anything. It was just information. Yeah, I'd be real hesitant to go forward with this. I think, right, in a few months, possibly. Right now, it's a tough sell for me, and I'd like to see the numbers too. They do reach out and explain their situation, and we won't shut it off. So, thank you.
Chris is going to intervene in our question list.
I just wanted to make one point, Mr. Chairman, and we had this discussion with staff when we met, and certainly some of these folks would probably be in a financial bind due to COVID, no doubt. There is a certain percentage and a fairly large percentage of these folks who were problem customers before COVID. So just as information.
Thank you, Chris. Next, I have Councillor McDermott, then Chase.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Actually, Councillors Grandy and Millett sufficiently addressed my concerns. So next.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor Chase.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Well, I'm fundamentally in agreement with Councillor Grandy, but I am going to say that I frankly think we would need to use the levers that we have. I mean, we've outlined, I think staff have been very clear saying this is significant money. It's probably 1.5% or so of our overall budget. It's significant bucks in an operation that's really, we're running along fairly close to the line. There's a lot of staff time involved in trying to sort out, whether the respective needs of 1,000 people. I mean, there's a huge amount of time involved there. Likewise, there's a huge amount of time of those staff going out and attempting to shut off a water system, assuming that they can get into somebody's house to do that, or the water shutoffs outside, right? Yeah, okay. So it's not a trivial thing to me. Either we do what's right, and I think what's right is we have to look after the best interests of the taxpayers of the city of Fredericton. That's number one. And then if there are some extenuating circumstances, it's totally reasonable to expect that people would at least get back to us when we've made repeated calls, to try to contact and sort out a situation. So I think we've been really nice about this. We really have. I don't think we're being more nice by letting it drag on, frankly. I'm prepared, when the time comes, is to do what I think is the right thing and start cutting off the water, particularly those that are the persistent, problematic type, starting with them. But, and if you can't pay and if you've got a good reason for us, then let us know, because we're pretty reasonable people. I think we've demonstrated that we're very reasonable people. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I now have Councillor McGarity, followed by Councillor Price.
Yeah, look, as long as it brings some form of compassion in here, and I'm hearing that, which is good. We can't paint everybody with the same brush. Everybody has a different case going forward. But if there's chronic people that just refuse to pay the bill for not for the lack of financial resources, that's different. But there are probably some pretty hardship cases out there, and maybe we could set some terms up. That's what I'm hearing too. So that's a good thing. So I think we're on the right road. Question would be, and maybe I missed this, is what out of those 1,000, how many are residential? How many are commercial business?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the vast majority are residential. Just by nature of our system, the vast majority of our connections are residential connections. Most commercial businesses do have auto withdrawal, so we take the payment, there's no issue. So it would be a very high percentage that would be residential.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Price.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Alicia. And just to build on what Councillor McGarity was asking you, when you say residential and commercial and you break those up, are multi-unit residential included in residential? They're not commercial, correct? Do you have any idea how many of those 1,000 people would be multi-unit, like landlords?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't have that data. Typically in a situation like that, there would be a lot more hand-holding that goes on if there are going to be multiple families or multiple units impacted. There'd be quite a bit more rigor, I guess, put around to make sure that that situation did not put multiple families without water if it was a landlord situation.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor Hicks.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and I certainly agree with the comments being made around here. But this is something we need to be careful with, and something we need to have some type of remedy moving forward. I realize there's a lot of people struggling, but what's to say, in 3 or 6 months from now, we don't have 1,500 to 2,000 people. If it comes out that people aren't paying their bills and they're not being, disciplined, so to speak, for it. It's very easy to have something roll out of control. So I agree with the communication, get out, try and make some contact, and obviously maybe the media will pick up on this and get the word out and help with that. But we just can't let it go indeterminately. So thanks.
Excellent point. Councillor Millet.
Thank you. Just a couple more questions. What's our total of customers in the system?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just under 18,000. So it essentially represents 5.5% of our customer base that we are trying to collect from.
Okay. And maybe for the chair or CEO, have we had any discussion with the province, with the feds, of any maybe help in those type of situations? Because we're having this discussion here. I'm guessing there's a lot of municipalities that have the discussion around the province. So, and I know there's been some different buckets that could to help out with that type of situation, but would any of them work with this situation?
Alicia, I asked that question of you earlier today. You want to provide the same answer?
Through you, Mr. Chair. We haven't made contact with the feds or the province. Kind of the sticky situation, I guess, with the utility fund is that it's a utility fund that runs under a whole different set of rules than most businesses. Typically in conversations, we do have the ability to shut off someone's water and collect. So it's hard to provide a different stream of revenue to help fund a water utility that has other ways and means to essentially collect that funding. I personally haven't made any contact. I'm not sure if Chris has had any discussions with the other municipalities.
CIO?
To Councillor Malay's question, we've had a number of discussions with the province at the CAO level from the 8 cities about our loss of revenues, but they've been outside of the utility. It's been the transit funds, recreation funds, parking funds, and whatnot. And we're still hoping for some relief, at least on some of those items, but not on the water and sewer side.
Thank you.
Councillor McGarity.
Just to go back to the percentage of customers, and I think Councillor Price sort of more specific on the residential, the apartment buildings. So when you say residential, that means apartment buildings. What would be the breakdown within residential, the apartment buildings? Would it be more apartment buildings than single?
No, through you, Mr. Chair, there'd definitely be more single family dwellings. I don't know what that breakdown would be though.
Okay. Help me here. I mean, the landlords are collecting rent and they're collecting high rents because rents are high. So there's nothing to stop them from not collecting rents. So why are not the landlords paying water bills?
And through you, Mr. Chair, I don't know the breakdown of what those
okay.
residential properties would be that are apartments. There could be none on that list. I'm really
okay.
not certain.
Okay.
But we would work with the landlords more diligently, I guess, because we know that there is a funding stream there and they are collecting rents from their apartment owner or
Okay. Thank you.
occupants.
Thank you for your question, Councillor. Maybe we can skip back to the 2021 water and sewer capital budget highlights and continue on from there.
Sure. So some of the major projects that we are planning on working on in 2021 would be Brookside Drive Phase 2, Rookwood Avenue Phase 1, Maple Street Phase 1, Canada Street, Wilsey Road. Looking at some engineering and design, potentially realigning the north side trunk. That would be the final connection there through the reserve property. Barker Street Wastewater Treatment Plant Phase 4. And overall, just the continued focus on infrastructure renewal and various streets that would align with some of the roadway operations work. So overall, the 2021 capital budget as proposed, 11.66 million for infrastructure renewal. So that represents 93.8% of the budget. The long-term financial plan does recommend 90%. So we are slightly above that for 2021. New represents approximately $110,000. And the non-tangible, which includes studies and design for future work, would be $660,000. So a total envelope there for a capital budget of $12.4 million.
Alicia, we have a question from Councillor McGarity.
Very quickly, on the Barker Street wastewater treatment plant, did we get any funding from the province and the feds?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we're hoping for that.
Okay, so we do have an application in.
Yes, so we are looking at some funding streams there that would help us to finalize that.
Thank you.
Moving on to the gas tax funding. So the 2021 allotment for water and sewer renewal is $4.2 million. Again, the areas of focus there, primarily the Nashwaaksis area, which includes Macadam Avenue, Winter Street, Summer Street, and Lilac Crescent, and the Silverwood area, which includes Fairview and Arlington. Just a quick snapshot there of the water and sewer budget overall, just to show the breakdown between revenue, our second previous year surplus, and personnel and non-personnel. As you can see, no major increases to kind of the expense side of things, just showing that we are committed to finding efficiencies and savings within the groups of dollars that we have. So overall, in summary, our goal is to keep the water clean and safe for all of our customers. We do have a significant deficit, which is the backlog of old infrastructure. As I mentioned, we are starting to address that and bring that number down. What that does result in, however, is unplanned breaks and unplanned traffic and service disruption. So ideally, we would like to tackle the hardest hit areas so that we can minimize those numbers. We do need adequate funding to maintain and replace what we have. So through revenue increases, that is how we do that. We still have one of the lowest rates in New Brunswick. And again, as mentioned, due to the increase in consumption, new connections, the recommendation for 2021 is not to increase that rate, but to maintain the increased revenue through that consumption. However, rate strategies will be closely monitored, and there will likely be rate increases necessary in future years.
Thank you kindly, Alicia. I have a question from Eric Price.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This question is actually a statement and a question for Dylan. Dylan, the crew that did the work on the bottom of Douglas Avenue where I live, I just wanted to tell you that they did a phenomenal job. I'm not sure who did it, but they worked night and day and they pounded it out and they did a fantastic job. And I noticed when they were doing the excavation that they actually uncovered some I don't know whether it was storm drain or whether it was or sewage or what, but they were actually handmade from brick. How old would that be, Dylan?
Through Councillor Price, I don't know the age of it right now, but there's a lot of stuff. We have some clay pipe in the ground right now that's 100 years old.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Councillor Grandy.
Yeah, yes, Mr. Chairman. I think we'll find it interesting, and we talk about more consumption this particular year. We're having double the banner year on single-family housing starts. So it'll be interesting to track that and watch this next budget year on consumption as well to see how that affects. But the way it's going, and surprisingly, single-family housing is increased as much as apartments, and it'll be interesting to see the consumption change in that. So we may see some good financials coming next year as well on that. Thanks.
Excellent point. Thank you, Councillor Grandy. Councillor McGarity.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, this probably is to Dylan and it's probably future budget years. How is the quantity of our water, because our city's growing, more subdivisions are popping up, and there might be some expected demand from outside regions and of course our program is, if you want water, you have to become part of the city. Are we prepared for that? And also too, we had double jeopardy is we had climate change. We had a real dry summer. So how quality or quantity wise is how's our levels of water?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I'll start with your last question first. So in the summer, we had extremely high consumption, and the water levels were, I don't want to say concerning, because we were never at a concerning level, but they were lower than what we were monitoring, I guess I would say, because they were lower than what they normally would be. But we're actually in a good situation now. It was around June when we actually were, our consumption was about 10 million liters more per day than we typically would, which is a lot. So we were up by about 30%. So our water levels were going down, but it was more for how much we were actually pulling in. As for being able to supply other communities for amalgamation, that's some stuff that we'd have to look at through a study. So you'd see in our capital budget this year now with our new municipal plan, we're actually doing a full water study and a full sewer study on what it will look like when our population actually does get up to 90,000.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. His Worship, you're up next.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. The way our population's growing, that we're heading in that direction for sure. So these couple of questions, a solid presentation, and I think the residents should have a great comfort in the fact that we're on track and we're on top of things, and our rates are just as low as they possibly can be while still delivering quality service. And on that note, I&I improvement projects related to water and sewer. I remember there was a number tracked one time about the possible savings through infrastructure renewal, an aggressive infrastructure renewal, what our annualized savings was on the water and sewer side. Do we track that? And have you ever got a ballpark where you think that would be? Because that is money that is put right back into more improvements. So I guess that would be, did you say that? And if so, I missed it. Good. Okay, you already answered it. You're on top of it.
It's about $1.2 million
There
for
you
you,
go.
Mr. Chair, that we have completely on an annual basis
Yep.
put back into our capital program.
Perfect. Thank you. And that is an impressive number. And the other one is on percent water loss. I'd asked a question, I forget the number was, but it triggered me when I read something in the newspaper 7, 8, 9 years ago about the city of London, England, where they were experiencing a water loss, percent water loss of one year, somewhere around 40%, which is phenomenal loss. And I remember asking the question, and I know we're below what the kind of a normal loss is, but again, going forward though, what does that do for us? Like, how do you turn that into savings?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So right now, this is water that we are treating, it's leaving our system, and it just goes into the ground somewhere.
Yep.
So it's not being paid for anywhere. So as we reduce that, our water loss ratio, that's more money or less water that we have to treat, less water that we have to pull out of the ground through our well system that we're not losing. So right now, we're producing 10% more than we're actually selling. So we are actually, as back to Councillor McGarrity's point, we actually are looking to drill another well. But the tighter system that we actually have, then the less we're going to have demand on our aquifer system.
Yeah, good. Again, those statistics, when you put them up, they're impressive on their own. But when you talk about what other communities are doing or how we compare to the normal average, they're even more impressive. So that's why I wanted to highlight them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No other questions or comments from council. If not, we should proceed to the resolutions that are before us tonight. In recognition of the Deputy Mayor being a strong advocate of residents and ratepayers' interests, maybe Deputy Mayor can move and read the first motion. So moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Grandy.
I'm getting there. Well, maybe I'm not. Technical issues here. Oh, there we go. Okay. Moved and seconded that the council city of Fredericton hereby approves the amount of $23,252,328 as the 2020 budget for water and sewer revenue.
Thank you, Councillor. On the question? Seeing no hands, all those in favor? All those opposed? Resolution's passed. Number 2, water and sewer operating budget. Moved by Councillor Grandy, seconded by Councillor Chase. That the Council of the City of Fredericton hereby approves the amount of $10,819,678 as the 2021 water and sewer operating budget. On the question, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion is passed. And resolution number 3, water and sewer capital budget, moved by Councillor Chase, seconded by Councillor Millet. That the Council of the City of Fredericton hereby approves the amount of $12,432,650 as the 2021 water and sewer capital budget. On the question, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion is passed. See no further questions. That concludes this portion of the Council and Committee open meeting.
Thank you.
We should get the city clerk have a resolution as to where we are to go if there are questions.
She did not. She just ran away.
If you
Mayor. I hope you didn't mind me throwing that out to you.
Sorry, I dropped the ball, couldn't find resolutions.
Hey, look, the drama made it for, more anticipated things that made it more.
All right, we're on schedule.
We will call the meeting to order. We're running a little bit late. That's my bad. I apologize. Oh, yeah, thanks for waiting. Yeah. Whew, got me off the hook. We're going to begin with item 1.1, the proposed amendments to bylaw A19, section 14, the standing committees. And Councilor McDermott is going to come up to the front and speak on that one.
Not doing this because I feel self-important. I just don't want to be talking away. Much as anything. So look, if you'll give me 1 second here, in anticipation of this, you would think that I had everything pulled up. I'm hoping that Council has had an opportunity to look at the staff report in regards to the proposed amendments to the standing committees. This has a history and a number of iterations in this conversation. The last meeting we had was just a few weeks ago. Came back to the governance committee, had another conversation in regards to what next steps were. And as you know, there is a resolution here to move forward that ultimately asks the city solicitor to make the necessary changes to the bylaw. I think it's bylaw E19. So with that, there are four items, and I'd like to just go through them, if that's okay with you, one by one, and see if we have agreement on it. And if we don't have agreement, have a conversation if necessary. This doesn't have to be the last step in the road. It can be just one more part of that conversation. So to begin, coming down here. So point one of the resolution is to rename the standing committees to match the language used for programs in our municipal budget as follows. I think that most of those committees, with the alignment to the alignment to the name is escaping me, but the program, the governing results programs. Thank you, clerk. We've gone through. There were a couple of questions on it. I'd just like to know if anyone has any issues at this point with the first point in this, in terms of the naming. And I can go through and speak on this, but we've spoken on it a fair amount. I think the one thing that should be pointed out, and it's a reflection of the conversation that we had in the past, was about the division of environment and public safety into two separate committees. They would be standalone committees. In our conversation at for the governance committee, that was as much in looking at it as a transition to a future time when either of those will actually, from a program point of view, will have more time. But for the most part, for now, it would be looking at the same number of meetings, just as numbers would be divided between those two. So I guess, question.
Councillor Erickson.
Yeah. Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Councillor. Just as a point of departure, are you referring to the points in the admin report or the points in the resolution?
Sorry, in the resolution. 5
in the admin report and there's 4 in the resolution. But
Yeah, I'm talking about yes. I'm thanks for clarification. I'm talking about the resolution.
Okay. On number 1, I have no problems. Thank you.
Yeah. There, Councillor Chase.
Thanks, Your Worship, and thanks, Councillor McDermott. I do have a question, not so much as it pertains to the names, but the resolution alludes to committees and the report does not include any of the terms of reference In other words, what are these committees supposed to be doing? Okay. And to me, this is a key missing point. Like I can agree that, yeah, these names are good, you know, and the other three components of the resolution, the composition of the committee and such. But I really, as I go through the bylaw, you know, where most of the, you know, what we expect the committee to do is struck out, and there's strictly the name is, and I don't think we're not proposing to amend the bylaw tonight. And if we are, then there's a deficiency in it, you know, in that it's a little too silent on what we expect these committees to do.
Councillor McDermott?
So really you're getting at point 4 in the resolution, which is exactly what you're talking about. And if you bear with me, we'll get through the first 3 points and get to that, because I think point 4 is where there's going to be more conversation. I think that it's a change in direction that was not part of the conversation prior to that. But I think that there's an opportunity to actually explain some of the thinking that the governance committee came up with in regards to that. So if you're okay with that, Councillor Chase, I'll just set that aside until we get to that 4th point.
Yep, fair enough.
Okay, great. Thank you. So on that first point, no problems.
No.
Okay, great. Second point, the composition of each standing committee shall have at least 4 members of City Council, not 2.
Any comments, concerns?
Could I just make a comment?
Yep.
So those are members, not including the chair, when you say 2, but the 4 does include the chair. There seems to be some weird accounting for people around the table, because the way I read it, the chair's there, that's 1, and then there'll be 3 other members appointed. Or is it the chair's there and 4 other members appointed? Right now, quorum requires a chair and 2 councillors, which would be 3 councillors.
Right.
So is it 4 members, not including the chair?
Oh, that's a good question. I hadn't done the math on that. So it may be that the CAO
value added from your finance chair.
the CAO can help me on the conversation on that.
I'm not the CEO, but we're looking at each other going, if I recall correctly, it was, I think 4 members for quorum, but wasn't it, it was, there should be 6 members appointed to the committee is what it should have been, what it should say. 6 members to the committee, and then it requires 4 for quorum, and the 6 would include a chair, vice chair, and 4 other members. That's how it's supposed to read.
Yeah, and my apologies when the 4 members was not something that stuck out for me, and the 6 members is what we've been talking about over the past couple of weeks in regards to that. So it would be 6 members, including the chair and the vice chair, and then your quorum is going to be made up of whoever is chairing, as well as those additional members.
If we could if we could understand mutually that that's what number 2 means, I don't have a problem.
Okay.
Thanks. Everybody's
for
clear on
clearing
that?
up. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, Councillor McGarity.
So just, are we limiting the amount of councillors on the committee? So that's still wide open. That's right. That hasn't changed. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, anyone can be a part of a committee, but there is a requirement that for every committee we have 6 members. So,
Yeah, okay.
Councillor Chase.
So just on that, so each committee would consist of half of council.
Well, it does now. But this term, I asked anybody if they want to sit. Some committees have 8 or 9 members on it. I don't think there's a committee that has less than 6 members on it. But this requires 6.
yeah, and look, one of when you look at it from a math point of view, when you look at it from a workload point of view, this is really making a requirement. My recollection is when you did the math on it, that every city councilor is going to be involved and serve on at least 3 committees.
Councillor Grandy.
Yeah, I just find it interesting. I go to some committees and there's one or two councillors there. I just don't know how you're going to practically get quorum. I just don't understand it. I understand the reasoning is good, John. Don't get me wrong. I agree with it, but I just know that it's hard to get quorum in a lot of meetings.
Councillor McGarity.
Well, it's up to us. It's our committees. That's how we run the city, and we go the committee system. We have to make a better effort. Simple as that, you know? And also we have Zoom too. So if you can't travel, at least you can Zoom in. So, I mean, yeah, it makes it even better, so.
Chris McPherson.
Your worship, and it's in the report, but we are trying something new. There is a review period that can take place if things don't work out the way we'd like. So I just remind council that we probably don't get it perfect, but it could be a step in the right direction. It's been a long time since we've changed standing committees, and I can tell you the duties that are in those documents, I had a part to play in it, and they were done a long time ago, and they were done very quickly after a reorganization. So it's probably a good time for the committees to actually look at their duties and refresh them and make them more relevant given the things that are going on in this day and age.
Okay. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, just something that Eric mentioned there earlier. Are we going to continue with Zoom and Teams into the future?
City Clerk.
Well, yes, because according to the procedural bylaw, I mean, part of this is we're allowed to do electronic meetings now under the bylaw. So we will continue with it because that was what we're heading towards before COVID even hit, was the ability to do electronic meetings.
Okay. Any other questions on point 2?
Okay, great, excellent, thanks. So getting back to the point that Councillor Chase had brought up is really about the fourth item on that. The specific and enumerated duties of each standing committee shall be removed. However, the current program description for each standing committee shall remain with the exception of the Public Safety Committee and the Environmental Stewardship Standing Committee. The Public Safety Standing Committee will retain a safe and secure community, and the Environmental Stewardship Standing Committee will retain a community that respects its natural environment, minimizes its environmental impact, and adapts to climate change. Councillor Erickson raised a point, and I think Councillor Chase has raised, Councillor Erickson brought it up prior to the meeting, and Councillor Chase has brought it up right now. This is actually something that we haven't had a conversation about. And I apologize for it being a little bit of a surprise. The conversation really in terms of at the government's committee level, when we were talking about that, was the question of those duties that are enumerated in the bylaw tend to be very prescriptive and definite. And it to a certain degree, it's not to say that you can't be flexible outside of that, but it creates conditions that you sort of have to do some things. It's not hugely specific, but there is that element. We looked at it and thought, Transportation Committee, for example, and this would go for all of them, is the Transportation Committee, or actually let's go to Environment since the program description is there. A community that respects its natural environment, minimizes its environmental impact, and adapts to climate change. I mean, that's a fairly sweeping statement about what the Environmental Stewardship Committee would be about, but it creates a starting point. So you can look at it almost as a vision or a mission for that particular standing committee. And then it would be incumbent to the chairs to really just design what that committee is going to be over that 2-year term. The example that I drew on, and Chris has talked about doing it internally with staff, is essentially akin to a mandate letter. So it would be a matter of what is the role of the committee and what are their goals that they're going towards beyond the vision. Is that part of that beginning of a 2-year term in chairing a committee, that we have that team building exercise that comes out of staff, that comes out of at a high level are council goals, and those get trickled down, and then we have that conversation. And it's those mandate letters. It's that statement coming from the chair as to what role it's going to play within the standing committee. And of course, that's going to be something that's approved by all members of the committee. So I don't know if that helps in terms of what that means, but I think it's simplifying the language in the bylaw, and it's adding essentially an appendix for each one of those committees as to what those what the particular mission for a 2-year mandate is going to be as chair.
We have 3-4 questions lined up. Councillor Chase first.
Thanks, Your Worship, and thanks, John. Look, I appreciate that explanation, and I do think simplifying the wording in the bylaw is fine, and that by embodying the terms and conditions in the bylaw, it is somewhat restrictive. I agree with that. Nonetheless, I think that it's important that there be consistency in the mandate of the committee over time. Beyond a 2-year term, someone might be chair. I think there's somewhere within our rules of procedure that there needs to be very clear definition of what the terms and conditions, or the terms of reference of the committee, each committee are. I do also think, and it's not said here, that, but I think you alluded to it, John, that at the beginning of each term, the committee chair should work with committee members and develop a mandate of priorities that the committee is going to address, over the 2-year period. But again, that somewhere requiring that, we have been somewhat attentive to that, in our committees over the last 4 years. But that's something that I really think needs to be built into the procedures. So with the terms of reference and the requirements that the committee identify priorities, and that it be aligned with, say, the pillars, I think that's all good stuff, but it needs to be clearly identified and attached, to something more than just the names of the committees. I think that's what you said, that the governance committee is going to come back, with this information. Is that?
Point of order. That's not the intent of this resolution. This is going to legal to be drafted into a bylaw to be approved. This is not scheduled to come back again.
Yeah. I refute that point of order, okay? Yeah. Because I'm speaking about the resolution that we've got before us tonight. So you're out of line, saying that. Okay.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to seeing clear terms of reference for each of these committees once we approve this resolution, these resolutions tonight. And I'd like to know when we're going to see that.
Okay. John.
Yeah, and look, and I said that at the beginning of the presentation. We've had a conversation. We've had a number of conversations in regards to this. This process was started because there was a dissatisfaction to the way that the standing committees, in a sense, were operating. So we've gone down this road, and we've had conversations like this at a number of points in this. It certainly is written like it's fait accompli, but it's not. I mean, that's part of being the governors on this. And there's no reason that this can't go back to the governance committee for a final round to actually, I guess, better dive down into those issues that you raise, if that's something that others want to have a conversation about. Myself, I'm comfortable with it. I don't want to rush this. I think Chris made the point that we're not going to get right off the bat. And we will have an opportunity at some point in the future to review this. But in the meantime, let's get it done. And if it means that we have to wait another 2 weeks to get it done properly by having another meeting of the governance committee to look at the language in the bylaw to reflect those concerns, then I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. Councillor Millet.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor McDermott mentioned he's comfortable with not rushing this. I don't think we've been rushing this. I think we've kicked it around enough times that it's time to.
This has probably been the most extensive conversation we've had on, except for Imagine Fredericton.
I had some questions. I like the explanation that you give. I like the flexibility that it gives council every 2 years to review. Sometimes people can be hesitant to change. I think we can say the same thing about council. It's going to be different. There'll be a learning curve, but I think it could be good in the future. I do have a couple of concerns. I'm fine with not having the term and conditions, and that's something we can figure out as a council after. It's without those term and conditions, there's a couple of things. One, I remember 4.5 years ago when I was named chair early on, and those terms and conditions in the bylaw was real helpful. So we just got to make sure that in the future that staff, returning councillors, we're working with some, if there's a new chair in that situation. And two, I know I'll take the development committee and the community services committee. There's a lot of issues that might overlap in between the two committees. And right now, it's great. I work really great with Councillor Grandy, so we kind of just make decision that falls under yours, that falls under mine. Without those term and condition, I'd be scared that some of those gray area might become a hot topic on where they fall. We just got to make sure that we work well as a council, and those discussions have a way to, how do we decide what falls under where when there is an issue that comes up.
Okay. Councillor McGarity.
Thank you. Look, John, thanks for doing the work you're doing on this. You know, it's a tough one when you're.
Peters too. Councillor Peters too. Yep.
And Mark. Well, I just see John up there, so both. So no, and that's good that you're both on this, and you know it's hard when you talk internally, when you're talking exactly like a family is who sits where at the table, who's chair, whose turns to watch television. It's hard, and when you start moving things around, when you start changing things, people can't accept change the way they are. The only thing that won't change is change itself. I've always said that. Now saying that is nothing personal, but you did mention that. Caught in and I hope it's not written in the policy like this, but the chair will decide. Well, no, the chair does not decide. That's the edit. Well, you mentioned that. I'm probably, if I misinterpret, I'm sorry, but that's the interpretation I get. It's the committee, the chair runs the meeting and also is a point person with staff. But the attitude of my committee, it's not my committee. It's nothing personal. It's the committee. When you talk about the committee, you say it's the committee. So we have to improve it, and that's why we have to take time. If it takes another 10 meetings, I don't really care. Well, let's take the 10 meetings and let's get it done right. I hope not. Yeah. But I do too. Don't worry about the time. It's something that we have to get right, and we do it right. So. And I guess the point, Councillor Chase, is, we do have to have some time where the committee sits down and do a little planning of issues. And guess what? We're not going to, if you plan for 2 years, guess what? COVID-19 hit. What's the plan on that one? So be prepared to throw everything out and start over again. So thank you.
Councillor Erickson.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'd like to start by thanking the Governance Committee for bringing this forward. My understanding when I opened up the admin report and the others, what this was going to be a simple referral of conversations we've already had to legal to start the bylaw drafting process on that. I was not happily surprised to see a new conversation embedded in language that was also destined to go off to the city clerk. I agree we've taken a long time, but we don't have to be in such a rush that we squish these things together. I mean, it's just totally inappropriate. I think the committee chairs and the committees themselves need to be part of this conversation because there's a lot of things that haven't been considered. For example, the tree commission's one of the groups that's referred to in the procedural bylaw, not referred to in the program, So they just drop out of existence as reporting to who, when, why, where, for example. These kind of things need to be considered, and they don't need to be considered on the evening we're sending something to legal to get put into bylaw language. It needs to be considered in a time and a space of its own where the committee might make itself available to council, to have these conversations without the need to send something off to legal. So because this is a resolution in front of us, it hasn't been moved and seconded yet, correct?
No,
Mr.
it has
Chair?
not.
I will move the resolution, not including item number 4.
To be addressed in another way.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? I'm 100% on side with the need to look at this, but without concrete program results areas to provide guidance and, the appropriate diligence in there, I think it's way too soon to send this piece off to legal to get drafted as a bylaw and then brought back in front of council for final approval.
So the motion is to approve the first 3 and delete item 4 for more robust discussion. That's been seconded by Councillor Chase. And on the question on the amended, no, that's the only motion we have, right? Councillor Grandy.
Yeah, no, I have no issue with that. Yeah, I think there's more work needs to be done to make sure we're aligned, the committees are aligned. But and I'm just going to make a comment. It's not to this, but just for council to think about. Chairs in a committee should not do the priorities. We as council do the priorities, and our discussion set up for this should be our listing of what our priorities for the next 4 years. That should dictate the priorities of the committee. Take and extrapolate from that exercise, and that should be your priorities. And the only reason I say that, Your Worship, it takes the personal side out of it, opinions from the chair if they're trying to coordinate what they think is priorities, right? It should be globally what the 12 councillors are, and that way. So that's the only thing. I just wanted to make that comment as we look forward, because there's a lot of talk about the chairs and the committee making the priorities, and I personally don't think that's the way we should be going. Thanks.
Okay. Chris McPherson.
Thank you, Worship. I think I was in the same lines, Councillor Erickson. If just to save time and effort in the future, the parts that you can agree to, maybe we could get them through, and then the governance committee can come back to the items like item 4 and have more discussion. And one of the things we talked about, and Councillor McDermott had referred to it as something I give the directors and chiefs is a mandate letter. And part of the mandate letter is the same for all of them. And that's that we're trying to achieve the corporate priorities, but then there's some specific to their department, things I'd like to see. I think each committee should be trying to further the municipal plan and achieving what's envisioned in that plan, since it's council's biggest policy document. But beyond that, there's things that have to be dealt with in short term that committees can have their own, some autonomy and come up with some of their own things that they think need to be addressed. But I do think like a mandate letter type thing, maybe that's not the proper term in terms of a council document, but something that is consistent for all the committees. And then each committee, obviously, if it's environment, are going to have things more environmental, for example, that are going to be short, medium, and long-term goals. So perhaps that could be something that we worked on. Part of the reason we were going to recommend taking that portion out now is it has been there a long time. Don't know how relevant it still is. There's probably pieces of it that are, but I think it needs a look at. But to be fair to council, we didn't chat with you folks about that. So I think it's fair that we would go back and take a look at that. But it would be good if we could try to get most of this through tonight for the things that council can live with.
There's 3 people want to speak. Yeah, John?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up, and really, I wanted to comment on a point made by Councillor Grandy as well as Councillor McGarity, and I apologize if I didn't articulate it very clearly, but I thought that I did, that the standing committees take their guidance from the council priorities. It filters down, and I think I said pretty specifically that the decision was made by the committee, not the chair. So there has been, just from a point of clarification, none of this has been trying to delegate a whole bunch of power into one individual. It's all of that stuff has been the same. The intention has been the same. And I apologize if I didn't articulate that clearly.
Okay, we have 3 people. Councillor Price.
Thank you, Worship. And thanks, Mark and John, for your work on this. You work on these projects like this and then come back and hear the wrath. But in fairness to Councillor Chase, I know we've had a lot of meetings on this, but I think if memory serves me correctly, he brought this up maybe in the very first meeting that we had about it, about the terms of reference. And I think it should be in there too. So I certainly support Councillor Erickson's amended motion just to relieve the number 4.
Okay. Councillor Dara, did you have your hand up all back?
I did earlier, but my question got answered.
Okay. Councillor Millet.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just before we vote on this, what's the plan for number 4 now? What's going to be the process we're looking at?
Chris?
Well, obviously, members of the governance committee are here or virtually. We've heard your comments, and we'll get together again and try to come back with something that we think we heard from you folks in terms of either leaving the terms there or revising them or coming up with some other plan that we would reintroduce to you folks. At least that's my opinion.
Yeah, and I agree 100% with that. And I think there was a point made by Councillor Grandy in regards to, the chairs seem to be part of this conversation. The committee did those interviews with council prior to at the beginning of this process. I think Councillor Grandy makes a fair point that maybe there is an opportunity to tap the chairs, not necessarily all of council, but to tap the current chairs to talk about that. So,
and on that point is that I agree with Councillor Erickson that there might be some issues with the tree commission that, right, we don't want anything to fall through the crack, but I like the fact that there is no term and condition. So if I know some people want to see it, but also I'm okay with having that flexibility and just let's put that discussion. It doesn't need to be, and it won't be here tonight, but just.
okay. And to that point, I think we were pretty clear in terms of the mandate that we were given, and we reiterated that the last time we got together, that this was about the standing committees. And I don't think, in my rough review of the proposed changes for A19, that this has any effect on those. On the advisory committees, like the tree commission and that sort of stuff. Everyone agrees it's important to go back and look at those because they've been in existence for a long time and their mandates very likely need to be updated in the same way that we're doing this. But that was not part of the scope of what we were working on.
Great. One last point, just because the committee doesn't have enough work, just because it came up a few times in the last little bit. We always say that the committees can't make a decision, but if the committees vote in a negative way, that resolution doesn't go anywhere. So it kind of just dies there. So I don't know if that'd be governance or it'd be a council discussion, but just to really clarify the role of the committees and how their decision affect the bigger picture.
Okay. Final comment, question, Deputy Mayor, then we'll put it to a vote.
Yeah, question for Councilor McDermott. I just wonder if he's prepared to stay on as a member of public when we're still discussing this in May. Is he prepared to do that?
As a member of the public for
succession
what?
planning.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
That'll be part of the next report.
May 10th is so long away right now.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Against? Motion's carried.
Excellent.
Thank you, John.
Great. Thank you very much, folks. I appreciate it. And we'll get her.
Okay. And it appears we're going to be back at it one more time, at least. Item 1.2, Black Lives Matter update from our CAO, Chris McPherson.
Thank you, Worship. I was asked last time we met that if I would come back and just give an update to council on where we think we will be with timelines on looking at the Black Lives Matter request to council. So I think we all realize that we're in a broad societal movement right now, and I can tell you the City of Fredericton is fully on board. I do want to thank Husani Raymond for the approach he took, understanding that these issues do go beyond Black Lives Matter to other communities. And we completely agree with that approach, and we'll be informing our work as we work through this. I can tell you that our work has begun. I put together a team of a staff team to start working to ensure our response, the response from the city, is full and effective. We want to ensure this important issue is given the time and attention it deserves. And I think Council realizes, and given tonight, that we're currently all hands on deck with our annual budget preparations right now, and we're working on several fronts to ensure that we can roll out an engagement opportunity for the public, but unlikely before early in 2021. And the idea would be, following that, I would deliver a report to Council with recommendations going forward. The work being done currently does include an inventory of current policies and operational strategies at the city and within the Fredericton Police Force. We're also doing a study on best practices for city our size across North America, including looking at the makeup of city budgets, how other municipal police forces include the social aspects of community safety within their organizations, and how cities with our level of resources and jurisdictional capacity can find innovative ways to work with communities, for example. And we are looking at the best engagement strategies, such as a community forum, perhaps using Engage Fredericton as a platform that really will allow us to hear from a wide range of folks while remaining COVID safe. So with that, maybe I will ask the chief if he wanted to just add to my comments, and then if any comments from council.
You got to at least grab a microphone, chief, somewhere. Up at the podium, just.
Yeah, and we certainly look forward to not only contributing to the report that's being done, but to the actual outcome. And as Chris and I have said in the past, if we're going to do this once, we need to do it right, and we need to take the time to do the research that needs to be done. I've started doing the research myself with chiefs across Canada to see exactly what is happening, not only with Black Lives Movement, but with best practices as to how we can deliver policing differently in the way ahead. And make no mistake about it, when it comes to finding new or different or innovative ways to providing service to this city, we're all in 100%. But again, I want to reiterate the same point is we need to take the time to do this right. We need to take the time to get the research, and to compare us to cities off the hop like Vancouver and Toronto is problematic. I've seen that from my first conversations with them. But what we need to do is take what they've learned and put into practice, and look at it from Fredericton Police and see how we can take what we've learned and put it into practice. And I reached out personally to Mr. Raymond for him and I to sit down and have a chat with respect to what he is looking for with respect to Fredericton Police policies, and the differentiation between operational policies and administrative policies, what information the public deserve and should have, and what information that's probably wrong to put into the wrong hands. And I've started those conversations, and I just want to take this opportunity to pass on to the council that we're all in with respect to finding a way forward and being active partners, not sitting on the sidelines, but making this work. So thank you, Your Worship, for this opportunity, and I look forward to the report down the road.
Thank you, Chief. Councillor McDermott.
Thanks, Your Worship. Chris, thank you very much for the update on that. I'm glad to see that really in short order that there's been movement made in that in an appropriate direction, 2 weeks, and already putting plans in place at least for figuring this stuff out. I guess the only thing is updating council on this is wonderful. And I guess the chief, actually, he's got his line of communication going with Husoni, and I would just ask that the same sort of courtesy be given to him in terms of saying, this is where we are, and keep him briefed. Stakeholder organizations who have issues that they want addressed, I think they understand it takes time, but they want to know that during that time. So,
thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. Oh, Councillor Rogers.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Chris and Chief, for the update. And I think, I recall when we made the motion, that was the concern, was on timing and would we have information? I know that part of the request is not the request from the motion, but I think part of the request that we're hearing in the community and potentially even from Husani in his presentation was that when we look at budgetary decisions, that we have some of this information. And so because there are budgetary implications and because of the short timeline of our budget, we always knew that that was going to be a concern. So I'm just wondering, how are we intending? I think it's wise to take time and to do it right. I'm in full support of that. But then I'm just thinking, as we're considering our budget and making decisions, how are we going to be factoring in any of the issues that were raised? Or when the police presents it's the operating budget, is that going to be taking into account, or even just a sensitivity, knowing that we won't have a full-fledged report and we won't have a whole slate of recommendations? And like I say, I agree. I think that takes time. But I am wondering, when we look at the 2021 budget, when we're making those decisions, will there be some sensitivity to the fact that there could be ramifications from whatever decisions are made? Are we looking ahead to that?
Chris.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I don't know if Chief wants to talk. We've chatted a lot since we first met with the group back quite some time ago, and the Chief has talked quite a bit about the way they deliver service in some areas, and I don't think it's appropriate for me to probably talk about that, but on an operational end, I know, Chief, you want to comment on that, but we're certainly sensitive to the issues, and I know you're trying to make some changes there to the way you may deliver services in some areas.
Thank you. As you recall, and I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, when I made a presentation to council, one of the things that we are heavily investing in is the area where the Black Lives Matter is zeroing in on. And that's the fact that there are some organizations, some social organizations that are better equipped to do some of the calls that we end up doing. Right now, as everybody knows, policing ends up being sort of a default organization. Within the patrol side of the organization right now, we have plans to increase the civilian side, where we will actually have social workers with youth at risk, mental health backgrounds and experience that will work with the patrol members. As you probably heard on the news this morning when the deputy talked about the body-worn cameras, and that's new virtually across Canada. I think we're probably 1 or 2 of the police organizations who are actually piloting that. And that allows us to go into these sensitive calls and to be able to communicate live one-on-one with subject matter experts in the mental health field and professionals and alike. So during that presentation, if you recall, one of the things that I did talk about was increasing our capacity on the civilian side. And in doing that, there's a downside of having less police officers that are available to do the police work. If you do it right, and those calls are reduced, or those calls are directed to the social work side or the mental health side or those professional sides, then it should mean a reduction of calls for police officers to do calls that are actually police related. The problem right now, and I appreciate where you're coming from with respect to the budget, the data is not there yet with respect to what that outcome would look like. If you look at social workers, they're not allowed to attend calls of that nature without a police presence. So you're not going to get a spin-off right off the bat. I think in the model that we're trying to implement going forth, I think we've increased 4 positions in that hub model, which are civilian positions: mental health, youth at risk, and addictions, dealing with the homeless issue, dealing with some of these problems that continually be where we go at the symptom of the problem and not the root cause of the problem. And so that's the process or the approach that we're taking going forward. In all honesty, I think in a year from now, we'll probably be able to see whether or not that is reaping the benefits of the efforts. But right now, our calls for service have not changed when it comes to mental health calls. And unfortunately, as the deputy dealt with this morning, our calls, mental health related calls are continually increasing. And somebody has to go. And I don't think we're ready yet to say this is not a police call and we're not going to go. We are a default organization when it comes to some of those, and we do respond. We respond the best way we can with the skill sets that we have, but we are seeing some really good results with some of the civilian side of the organization with different skill sets and expertise and educational background than some of our members do.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. So I guess just as a follow-up, so I think it would be safe to say that even though we're going to be following up on the recommendation in 2021, in this budget cycle, there are considerations being made for funding positions, civilian positions that may address some of the issues that were raised in that presentation. So I think that we can feel comfort in saying that. Okay, thank you very much. And I will say, I heard Deputy Chief Gadet this morning, and he was excellent, but it is startling. And I think a really valuable point he made is though, even, yes, mental health calls, the straightforward mental health calls are increasing, but then you look at all the calls that don't register as mental health related, but have underlying mental health causes. And it's very startling. So thank you.
Good. We have four people, yes?
I'd like to raise a point of order. At a closed meeting on September 21st, the chief presented a variety of ideas to council. And council's getting very close to talking about those same items that were held in a closed session.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Grandy.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I think when we talk about budgets and we talk about money, taxpayers' money and request, I think we always sit around and we always have a great conversation. I'm using your kind of talk, Councillor McDermott, conversations about how that's going to go. We get presentations from either the CAO or subsequently from the directors and everything about where money's going to be spent and how we're going to spend money. The motion and the requests that were made are not out of line. I think it's a conversation that is needed and it has to happen. It's not something that happens overnight. When we look at some disclosure items that the motion indicated going forward and things, that's just not something you can do unless you have the conversation that the chief's already talked about having, a discussion with Mr. Raymond and looking at what policies can and cannot be shared. And we've got to be clear that, there's privacy issues and there's a number of issues around disclosure. There has to, and what I'm saying, it has to take time to do this. I'm not talking about delays of years or anything like that. I think the CAO has outlined a good initial strategy on the way forward. I think groups should be happy that we've recognized, that we've listened, that we're actually starting an implementation plan. And the chief has already started his discussions, very open and doing with colleagues across Canada. I think there's a great movement, and we have heard where the chief wants to go. We have heard what the chief wants to do internally. And I'm not going to disclose any conversations, Councillor Erickson, but we've seen that as a council. At the end of the day, when we approve the budget, it's up to the chief or the CAO to articulate that vision, what they've come up with. So at the end of the day, I'm comfortable with the way we're going. I'm comfortable with addressing what's there. I'm comfortable with the process we have for budget. And I'm comfortable with the fact that, can we say X amount of dollars is being spent on this? No, not really at the moment, but there are initiatives happening. So I don't think we can lose track of that happening. So I just want to be careful in the fact that, it's not like we're going to go in there and say, oh, $10,000 is going to be allocated for this or that. I think, to me, it's about the sound strategy, is about data and information to make informed decisions that will benefit all of the people in the city of Fredericton and address what the groups are asking for as well, and try to balance that. Thank you,
Councillor Dara.
Thank you, Worship. I'm going to ask you the question because I don't want to take away from the agenda item. Yeah. So the question I had was based on what the chief was saying about some of the things that he's been working on doing. and people and different organizations and different positions, different social side of things for the policing. So I was going to ask what the buy-in was or what the conversation was like with Horizon and expanding the mobile crisis unit outside of the 4:30 to 12:30 hour, so 16:30 to 12:30 hour. So my question is to you, because I don't know if you want me to ask me that at a later date, because it's kind of off topic.
Well, that would be later, and I haven't had that conversation with them, so, but that would all.
I can wait,
Yeah.
Okay.
That'll all be part of a conversation. We've got a whole pile of people. We got to keep moving here, people. You're in line. Just a sec. Okay. Yeah.
And I think it's important that we have a conversation. I just question if right now is the appropriate time to have that conversation.
Yeah. Well, that's what we're trying to get to here is everybody has some comments to make, and I want to wrap it up pretty quick. Councillor McGarity, then Chase.
It's about diversity within the city itself internally. Well, that's what we're talking, diversity and equity and inclusion. So we have to move internally from the city to do that. And I think a lot of these issues would disappear, but it's going to take a lot of time. My question is, when we talk about mental health, and then that was brought up, is it's sad that when the police are involved, that's the end of the line. It's serious. It could be really serious. So my question is the prevention of this stuff, and who controls that? As a city, we can't. We don't have those resources, but we're expected at the end of the line to provide those resources and really have to do some tough things, which doesn't make our police officers very popular sometimes. It's a tough job when you're dealing with people like that. But when people have a problem and they cry for help, if nobody's gonna answer those calls, it's gonna get into the desperate situations. And we all know those desperate situations, how they end up with. So, I mean, it's a conversation we have to have. We don't have to have that time tonight, but we still have to deal with those conversations. It's that prevention. The old adage is a preventive measure is, pay $5 now or pay $500 later. When we bring all those resources in, things go sideways in a hurry. So it's something that it's a timely conversation.
Just remind everybody, that's exactly what the CAO said we're going to do. We've been talking for half an hour about the issues that the CAO was going to address in his meetings here, but Councillor Chase.
Yeah, thanks. I'll be brief, Your Worship. And I'm not going to use the word conversation in this conversation. Look, I'm completely comfortable with the scenario that the CAO has laid out and added to by Chief Brown. Throughout this, public safety is paramount. I think our Fredericton Police Force officers are well equipped to be the first responder and to bring whatever additional resources that need to be brought to the table. I'm confident that they will do that. So, with that, I say let's get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
15 seconds. I am part of a forum with on a national level with Commissioner of the RCMP, Vancouver, Edmonton, Toronto, Ottawa, some of the organizations who are out in front leading with respect to ways forward, and obviously we'll report back on some of their initiatives and how it can apply to us and how we can apply it to the general well-being of our city going forward. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm positive that we will do our usual, very firm, robust job in communicating with getting feedback from the public and interest groups, and then having our professional staff put their lens on it, and we'll come back with something that's improved and powerful when the time is right. So, item 1.3, civic innovation, digital infrastructure, 5G. That would be Lori Guthrie's going to take that one. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. So Adam and I are going to tag team this presentation. So just everybody probably recalls that on September 24th, we were super excited to announce that Fredericton is the first 5G city in Atlantic Canada. We worked really closely with Ignite Fredericton and CyberMB to actually put together an announcement that really put the spotlight on Cyber Center and to announce a 5G enabled cybersecurity innovation lab as part of that initiative.
So this is a really big deal in our opinion, and I'm going to tell you why. We see this as a critical step in the city's digital evolution. I know you probably can't see that slide. It's pretty small print, but it just kind of gives you a snapshot of where we've been since 1992. It's in your council package. They say that 5G is supposed to be the most transformative technology since wireless was introduced in 1985. So this is going to be a really, really big deal for Fredericton. It's going to fuel our talent and our entrepreneurial pipeline. And we really think that this is going to help position the city as a 5G center of innovation. So make no mistake, this has been a very deliberate plan that Adam and I have been working on since last November. It's, oops, I went too far. Kind of skipped. That's part of our civic innovation strategy, and Adam's going to speak to this in a moment. But last November, almost a year ago, we actually pitched this to Rogers. We were at a Christmas party. We had an opportunity to have the year of a senior executive, and we told them all about the city and why we're a smart city and how perfect it would be for them to expand and make Fredericton their first 5G center in Atlantic Canada. So, and this was also part of a multi-year agreement that we have with Rogers. So it really was a true win-win. So I'm going to hand it over to Adam, who's going to talk a little bit about what this means. And as you can see, we presented these pillars before of the Civic Innovation Lab. So the digital infrastructure element is what we are here delivering on today.
Thank you, Lori. I thought I'd just take a few moments because we're kind of presenting two things at once. One, an exciting advancement that we're making in Fredericton in terms of the digital infrastructure we have available to us. But as Lori mentioned, this is a very deliberate step as part of our civic innovation strategy. So I know many of you have seen the strategy before. We work closely with Development Committee on building out what civic innovation should look like. And we've gotten great direction from that committee and good feedback as well. And Lori had prepared a white paper that was reviewed, and we prepared these elements of the strategy. So as you were speaking earlier about committees, I was reflecting how important they can be to develop and assist with developing strategy and providing guidance and feedback. So I won't get into all the details of what's in the strategy. If you're interested, certainly hit Lori up for the white paper. But I will tell you, if you remember nothing else about the strategy, the two outcomes that we're really shooting for out of this. Number one is a sort of a workshop that we can use to improve city services and municipal operations in the way we deliver services. So it's about us using this as an opportunity to enhance either our service efficiencies or the way we deliver services. So that's the first kind of outcome. The second outcome is to provide economic development opportunities and economic vitality for the city in the way that we're able to use this as an opportunity to get tech companies to invest in Fredericton and start up new companies. And I think actually one of the great pieces of feedback we got from the committee was make sure you engage well with our stakeholders. So you can see that a big part of our strategy is engaging with our external partners. And in this case, we've engaged with Rogers to bring some digital infrastructure here. So you kind of see those two outcomes mapped out in our strategy. On the one side, we have the civic idea hopper. That's about finding ways that we can use this advanced technology to make our city better and looking for good problems for it to solve. And on the other side, it's about the referrals to our external partners and the commercialization of ideas that come out of that. And we worked, initially with Larry's group at Planet Hatch and Ignite to build those type of structures. The digital infrastructure, what the 5G is going to allow us to do is gives us an actual platform to innovate from. It gives us real infrastructure in Fredericton that's live now that we can engage those post-secondary education partners on, that they can bring their students in to innovate on. It's a platform that we can use to hold startup events, and Lori will tell you about some of the upcoming ones that we have. And then the kind of the fourth or the sixth pillar, if you will, is some sandbox funding to seed these things. So in the past year, and we've brought some examples through the development committee about some projects that we did where we provided some seed funding, and in one case, a local company took our seed funding and leveraged that with NBIF to advance a huge initiative there. So we've developed this strategy, and now we're actually executing on it, which is really exciting. In the white paper, we had 8 opportunities But again, I'll just draw your attention to the two kind of primary outcomes. One about improving municipal operations, and the second about economic development opportunities. And I think the really interesting thing that I'm excited to have Lori share with you is around opportunity 7 and 8. So we want to engage the innovation ecosystem partners in support of the kind of lab that could help us build better municipal services and at the same time provide economic development opportunities. So Laura will tell you in a minute about how we broaden that partnership out from our basic start. And then just our ability to build out digital infrastructure and engage our partners like Rogers to build good infrastructure. So we're seeing success in this area, and I hope that what you'll see over the coming months is the realization of what we're able to do now with this type of infrastructure and this type of partner engagement. And Lori, if you talk a little bit more about the partners.
Thank you, Adam. So as you mentioned, we're not doing this alone. Our partners actually, I guess I'll back up a little bit, during COVID when we had the lockdown, had an opportunity to really think about who needed to be part of this. And we didn't want to go it alone. We wanted to reach out and engage with our key stakeholders in the community. So we owe them a huge thanks. And I really want to take a moment just to recognize Larry Shaw and Sarah Corey Hollahan at Ignite Fredericton, Dr. David McGee, at the University of New Brunswick, Dr. Dhirendra Shukla, who runs the J. Herbert Smith Technology Management and Entrepreneurship Center at UNB, Dr. Ali Gorbani, who runs the Cybersecurity Institute of Canada, Dr. Diane Burt with MBCC, Dr. Bill MacGyver, who I believe is on the call with us tonight. We may have a few of our stakeholders who have joined us, and Tyson Johnson from Cyber NB. So we owe them a huge amount of gratitude. And, as I said, we worked very closely with them. Collectively, we're working together. We really see an opportunity of a vision of becoming Atlantic Canada's 5G Center of Innovation. So I really, truly believe that's attainable. And we have the building blocks here and we have the right people engaged. So it's very exciting. So this Fredericton Innovation Partnership Group, I won't go into detail. We have mapped out terms of reference, but there are 5 pillars. So obviously the infrastructure deployment piece. So that's Rogers has been working on that over recent months. The 5G product development piece. So being able to fuel the pipeline to Ignite and Planet Hatch and the TME program so that students and entrepreneurs can develop new edge applications and solutions. It's a real opportunity for us to create a center here of experts in terms of talent and workforce development. So that's a key piece. The research, applied basic experiential research around 5G. There's tremendous opportunities, especially on the data side as well. And then, of course, partnerships and collaboration. So as with this group, we're working very closely, and I think there's an opportunity to share best practices. UBC, I believe, was the first center that Rogers had established partnership with their 5G deployment. Then a number of communities in Canada, but the University of Waterloo has kind of been central Canada, and then here in the Atlantic. So I'm going to pass it back to Adam.
So the kind of question we get asked a lot is what exactly is 5G? So as Lori mentioned, it's a game-changing technology, and some interesting facts. It's really fast, as they say, 400 times faster than the blink of an eye. So you're getting good speeds now in your communications system, but it's about 400 times faster than the blink of an eye. It's really incredibly fast. The other key aspect of it is what they call latency. The time lag between when you get your information is really, really low. And so what it means is you can have really amazing access. So if you think about future applications like autonomous self-driving cars, if you're going to convey some information to them about dangers in the road, you don't want that information to be delayed. You want it instantaneously, and you sometimes need a lot of it. Lori mentioned UBC. They actually work with Rogers. They have a bit of an innovation lab there as well. They work with the startup at UBC, and they built an application for the city of Kelowna. So what it meant for Kelowna was they took real-time LiDAR data, which is a form of radar, if you will, at their intersections, and they used the 5G technology to really quickly analyze what was going on. And rather than just waiting till a crash happened and someone called for emergency services, they would detect when a crash happened and proactively make that call. And in addition to that, they started recording near misses. So they used the advanced technology to figure out where traffic and pedestrians and cyclists were having issues. And I think that's just one example of how they were able to tap into the technology to solve for one of their problems. And really where the industry's at is there's a lot of investment going in. Rogers mentioned on our call with them today, they're investing tens of billions of dollars in Canada. So far in Fredericton, we've attracted some of that investment. But the industry doesn't yet know all the uses and all the applications. So what we're trying to create with our partners is the ability to uncover those applications and find out what does it mean for a city and what would a smart city do with this type of technology. And that's the type of lab that we're trying to create. So the question that we expect to answer over the coming months and years is, what can it do for us and how can we benefit from being first? The other question that we sometimes get asked is it safe? There's lots of information out there and people concerned that it may not be safe. And the thing that I found most interesting when we were doing our due diligence on it was I assumed that cellular communications were regulated by someone like the CRTC. In fact, it's regulated by Health Canada, who does the research on the health impacts of the technology and has the expertise to understand the various research, and they set the regulations. And so Rogers as a telco provider and us as a city, we defer to those experts within Health Canada who set the guidelines for radio transmissions, and will adhere to all their guidance. And for those who have concerns, the appropriate regulator is Health Canada, who can address those and has the deep expertise to assess those. So I think we're really excited about the opportunities and about the style of the lab that we've created. If you do want to know more about 5G, Lori will be telling you in a minute about our next steps. And what I would encourage you to do is come to the webinar and come to the information session and hear more about it.
So what's next? We actually had a meeting with the Fredericton Innovation Partnership today. We are collaborating on presenting a webinar that's going to be coming up in November. It's on the 17th, so I'll be sending information out to council. But we really wanted to provide some proactive education and community awareness so that our researchers and our students and educators were aware of the art of the possible and what this means to them, in particular, you know, the startup community. So that will be coming up. Plans are really evolving with Rogers. We've had some really interesting conversations with their National Director of Innovation and Partnerships, and we have proactively approached Ignite Fredericton about bringing a new Rogers program to Fredericton. It's a really big deal, so we're working that out right now. But in the new year, so after we'll do the webinar in November, in the new year, we'll probably do, if there's demand, a deeper dive, kind of more technical sessions for the technologists and developers. The end of January, we're going to have a hybrid event up at Cyber Center. And I'm calling it kind of a hack type-thon, but essentially we will be developing use cases and defining some specific problems. And then depending on those problems, they'll go into this program using Rogers methodology. And it's really cool. It's gonna, as I said, fuel the entrepreneurial pipeline, and I think have a lot of other benefits that will snowball out of this. So stay tuned. There's lots of exciting things to come. This is also in your council package. It's very hard to see, but it's a bit of a roadmap that shows what we're trying to do, and the end product being kind of, you know, coming out with those proof of concepts and minimal viable products. So anyways, that's everything for my presentation. So if there's any questions.
No, but just a comment. I want to thank the two of you for your leadership on this, along with all our partners. And I'm glad you listed all our partners, because we can't do it without them. This is just an evolution. There's been amazing work going on here in the Fredericton area and the Fredericton region, starting back with Freddy Zone and our smart city, and then our digital city, and then a gigabyte city, and then a cyber hub, and got the Startup Community of Canada Award. And this is just the next step. And there'll be another step after this. I don't know what it is, because we have the talent and the vision in our staff and our partners here that come up with these ideas and work with the national partners to make them happen. So this is all in support of our Imagine Fredericton, our 25-year growth strategy, and where our strengths are and where we're going as a community. So thanks to the two of you and everybody that's working with you to drive this home. So thank you. That was a good presentation and a great, exciting opportunities for the city. Okay. Councillor Grandy.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to both of you, but also thank you to all of those who are stepping forward to be part of your group going forward. You've got quite a resume of people on your group, and the key strategy here is this innovation lab and a center of excellence for 5G. I can't state enough where this technology is going to take us, and to be positioned to be the first city in Atlantic Canada, but also with the resources and the people that we have coming on board here for this, it can become a center where applications, different mindset, the future, thinking of the future can happen here, right here in Fredericton. And I think that's so important. So we got to thank Rogers for the investment into our city in bringing this technology forward and at this time. And the other part of this and the outcome is of what I've seen in the municipal hackathon that we did up at Planet Hatch, and the pool strategy that came forward and the application there. I can just think about all of these different use cases that are going to come out of such of these type of events that Adam and Lori talk about, and it's great. And we had a view of where this lab was going at development, and Adam's been and Lori have been progressing with us, giving us the white paper, the committee, although those who sit on my committee or the development committee, not my committee, the development committee, certainly gave a lot of feedback back to that. So my only last comment on that, and I look forward to being part of that going forward, I hope, and I'm certainly going to participate in all those events. I'm in that sort of industry. But the other side of that is, when I don't want to take any thunder away from Councillor Keenan at all, but with this going forward, it's about the pitch for the cyber center and the cyber building we have there. It's sitting empty right now. We need to move forward on that. I think government has to collaborate with Knowledge Park, and we have to get this going. And we're going to create this center of excellence for 5G cyber. We have the opportunity to be leaders in cybersecurity as well, and I think we're missing a whole gamut of economic development opportunities in many fronts with that center sitting like it is. So thank you, Worship.
Councillor Keenan.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship, and great presentation, Lori and Adam. And Bruce had mentioned the partners that you have there right now. I do have a question as to the members that you have here now. Did you have a thought towards having entrepreneurs included, like private organization people, and why they're not part of the innovation partnership now, or how will they connect into it?
Definitely. And I think at a future point, this was just a starting group of kind of the key stakeholders, thinking in terms of, Larry and his team on the entrepreneurial side, the researchers, the educators, but absolutely. And just through the program, the Innovation Lab and the work we're doing with the Sandbox right now,
I mean, we've been blessed with with innovators in our private enterprise and in our knowledge sector. So I would encourage you to incorporate some of that and get them, providing ideas as well. And just follow up on what Bruce mentioned in regards to cyber. There are there's lots of good things happening there. There's some momentum being built. But to your point, Bruce, the provincial government has a role in this. They're aware they have a role, and it really is time for them to step up and meet that role that they've committed to in the Cyber Center. Because this is an opportunity for huge success for our city, and we need all of our partners on board, including the province and the components that have always been intended to be in that park. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McGarity.
Look, I just focus on the city. Is it Laura One? Is that pronounced that right? Laura One? Yeah, Laura One. It's, and for people who don't know, I think it was a technology developed in France, and I think Simatech bought the rights to it. Not quite sure on that. Don't quote me on that, but it's low power. So I mean, that means having sensors around the city on anything. And it's such a low power, the batteries don't have to be changed for 2 or 3 years. So that in itself takes us way over a big hurdle. It doesn't have to be wired. So, and that's a good thing. And some of the things you brought up about the accidents of, trying to, almost like predictive analysis is when you're out there, we know what's going to happen. So, I mean, this will circulate all through it, in the police, fire, transportation, buses, whatever services we have here. This is something that's going to revolutionize how we do, and also smart city. Data doesn't lie. When we get the correct data, we make better decisions. No two ways about it. So this is a great step forward. I'm happy to see the work being done here. So thank you very much for the work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Good. And Councillor Grandy and Keenan, I've heard your comments here tonight, and I'll be trying to make an effort to speak with the province on the cyber park about their engagement and involvement on that. So, next, we have the 1.4 moment of reflection, and that was, as you recall, we had a bit of a discussion a few weeks back, and I think it was my suggestion that it would go to governance committee, and the governance committee I think did meet, and John McDermott's going to part of that, going to lead us through a discussion. But it was quite clear when the governance committee got together, there really wasn't a governance committee issue; it was a city council issue. I think there was some information compiled. There's no recommendation. This is a discussion, but in the lack of a recommendation, sometimes the discussion can go on and on and on. So I'd like to offer, I'm not going to try to put words in anybody's mouth, but what I see is 3 options that we just keep along with what we're doing, the status quo, and appoint a new poet laureate when this one's over. There's also an option to consider different terms and conditions or terms of reference for poet laureate, and they would carry on with a new one. And I think the third option that we could discuss or consider here tonight is that it's the status quo to the end of this term, and then leave it to the new council to discuss how they'd like to go forward in June of next year with a poet laureate or a combination thereof or something different. So I think with since there's no recommendation, sometimes we could go all over the board. So those are just 3 that I throw out for consideration. But John, you take us from here and see where you're going to take us.
Great. Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, it was sent to the governance committee. This clearly wasn't a governance committee issue. And I know. Anyway, it's been punted back to City Council, and just by virtue of the fact that it touched the governance committee, I guess I'm the one who's going to facilitate this conversation. Look, thanks, Your Worship, because I think you really summed it up. In terms of we have 3 options to a degree, and I think if we can go to if I can cut to the chase and just go to one of the questions, and really the question is, do we want a moment of reflection? Yeah. And that's my question. Mm-hmm. Do we want a moment of reflection? Because we've had this ongoing conversation really since actually prior to the Supreme Court making a ruling about not having prayer. But even prior to that, we were having conversations about it. That came up. We went through a moment of silence, moment of reflection, and now we have the poet laureate. Is that an important function of our agenda? Councillor Erickson.
Yeah, and there's some information in the report about who does what in different cities. So, Councillor Erickson.
Well, from my perspective, I answered that question in the affirmative. Yes, I would like to see a moment of reflection. And it's not necessarily because other people are doing it, although I appreciate the comparative analysis that is in the report. But there's actually independent research that shows that deliberative bodies make better decisions when they begin their meetings with a moment of reflection. Now, I'm not saying a moment of reflection is equivalent to an address by the poet laureate. Moment of reflections take a variety of forms, but I want council to make the best possible decisions. And one of the tools that's available to us is to have a moment of reflection at the beginning of our meetings so that we take advantage of that research demonstrated point.
Okay. Councillor Millet.
That's great. Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, John. I'm a big fan of the moment of reflection. I think with the role that we're in, it gives us a moment to think about what we're doing. I'm one of the councillors. I remember having meetings with city clerk early on, and when we weren't doing this, to see if it was a possibility. Because I like the poem before council. Do I like every poem that's read? No, but that's what poems are, and that's what art is. So I like the status quo. I'd like to see this continue. And I don't see any reason why we would change from what we're doing.
Okay. Councillor Dara, then Chase.
Thank you, Worship. Thanks, John. I like the moment of reflection. I don't think that we need to change not having one, whether it be a moment of reflection or a moment for us to take in different forms of culture. I think that we could maybe change the way we look at it. So based on what you had said at the beginning and thoughts that I'd had over the weekend, I had gone through this and thought about some options. And some of the options that came to mind were continue this on until the end of the contract, of course, because we should stay true to our contract, and punt it down the line for the next council to make the decision on what they would like to do for their term. But in the meantime, between February 1 and June 1, let's say, have our, is the correct term for Angela, cultural officer? Have the cultural officer reach out to many different areas of the community and have different culture people come in and speak for 5 minutes and maybe educate us or re-educate us or bring to light some other type of idea and, just learning for us. So it could be a hybrid of poems or lecturers or just different culture leaders in the community for us to learn more.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Chase.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for John for taking the podium. I reflect on council stuff most of the week. I don't particularly, after the experience that we've had, from when it's 2014, when we decided not to no longer have, a prayer to open council, and then to, moments of silence where we would reflect in the evolution, to having a poet laureate. I look back on that and say, well, do we really need to have this moment of reflection? Because, we have before us a completely diverse agenda, that we've reflected on, leading up to the council meeting. So I don't really feel the need, for an extra thought here. You should reflect on this, or, here's a poem to reflect on, or here's a piece of art to reflect on. I don't really see the need. I think we're trying to fit something into this little slot of time that, may or may not contribute to the quality of business that we're trying to create. So I'm not generally supportive of a moment of reflection. I think if we were to persist, in having people come before us and bring ideas, maybe that's not a bad thing, to bring in a community partner, and every couple of months, once a month, whatever, bring in somebody from, say, St. Mary's First Nation, UNB, Base Gagetown, somebody like that to come in and give us, say, a few minutes of the and I'm thinking of this on the fly, but I mean, ideas that really relate strictly to the kind of business that we're trying to pursue and the kind of community partner that we want to be. That's where I would like to see us if we're going to have a moment of reflection. What I don't want to see is something that's going to generate controversy and ill feeling and that kind of thing. And that's the sort of experience that has detracted from, this moment of reflection. We don't need that as a city. I think we're doing great things. And this is just something that, that's what it's turned into. I really don't think that, that we need, things that are going to generate controversy, aside from our regular line of business, which seems to generate controversy from time to time. So anyway, thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Keenan.
Thanks, Your Worship. I didn't want to speak early. I mean, I think I kind of started this kerfuffle. So, but I wanted to hear what my colleagues had to say about it. And so a couple of things. First, I'd like to thank some of the folks that have reached out to provide a perspective for me on this issue. There are some that I certainly respect that have reached out, and I've taken what they had to say into consideration for sure. I will say as well, there was a typical amount of hate and vile out there on social media. It's pretty impressive what you can say on social media, and it was no different this time. And I think it really speaks to one of the downfalls of our environment today in social media, that people will say sorts of things like that. Matter of fact, I had one comment that actually was slandered me based on my sex, my age, and my race, all in one swipe, which I thought was pretty impressive for one comment. So I'll just leave that there. But having said that, I do want to make a couple of clarifications. One, I think the poet laureate. Actually, I think we need a poet laureate. We're a cultural city, and the poet laureate. It gave me an opportunity to go back and look at the terms of reference for the poet laureate as well, and and they engage the community in culture, and I think that's an important part of what they do. We also contract them to write poems based on the culture of the city and the history of the city and special events that we're having. And that's an important component as well. So I think to my mind, these are two separate discussions. One is not so much about the poet laureate, because, again, I think we appoint a new poet laureate or we go out to call and whatever, that process becomes. And we continue that. I think the larger discussion is, what do we do with that moment of reflection, and how do we have a moment of reflection that incorporates, I would say, differing points of view, if nothing else, because and that was really, I think, one of my frustrations with it. It was all a similar point of view that we were getting on topics week after week. So I'd like to see a more diverse point of view from the community. I think Kevin and Stephen have said that. So maybe it's that we don't have the poet laureate read a poem before every meeting, but we have them in to read poems as part of our natural schedule for that. So we would have them visit us occasionally, but not every meeting. And on those meetings, we look at where else in the community could we have people to come in to talk to us. And honestly, I think that should be from all facets of the community, including the faith community, to talk about the things that not about religion, but about good societies, and the poet laureate to bring things about good societies, because a good society is one that encompasses everybody. And Councillor McGarity says it all the time about we need to include everybody. And I think that's the important part, is that we include everybody in what we do in our moment of reflection. And I think we can turn this into a positive. So those are my comments. So I hope I think we continue, but when we go to the new poet laureate, maybe we change our moment of reflection a little bit at the same time. Thank you.
Councillor Rogers.
Thank you, Worship. So I go back, and I even did it, I've been doing it lately and thinking back to the origins of the Poet Laureate and why we created that position to begin with. And again, it was something that came out of our culture plan, as so much has, and this recommendation that we have a cultural laureate. And we selected that first year to that it be a poet laureate because of Fredericton's history in poetry. We were very fortunate in the people who put their names forward and the jury who selected Ian Letourneau. But if we recall, when he was first poet laureate, he was not asked to read at council meetings. I mean, he was asked to, I think, a few times a year. He came forward, and that was all that was required of that position. Frankly, at that time, the position paid $2,500 a year. It now pays $3,000 a year. In my mind, it's actually quite a lot to expect a poet to come every 2 weeks and give a poetry reading for that amount. But nevertheless, so it was never part of the original, when we envisioned and we did up the original sort of terms of reference for the Poet Laureate, it was never envisioned that they would come and read at every council meeting. So I think that we can remind ourselves of that. We did get into that practice.
Councillor Rogers, the first time the Poet Laureate came was for the 2 meetings during National Poetry Month.
in April of 2017.
And that's what that started coming to council for 2 readings.
Yeah, and then it just went on from there. And I liked it. Like, I'm like some of my colleagues. I liked it very much, but I don't think it's a requirement for that position. I frankly think, I've always felt that it was actually a lot to expect of the Poet Laureate to come every 2 weeks to give a reading. I like the fact, and I mentioned this when this last came up, I like that the poetry is provocative from whatever. I never think, and it hasn't been I haven't viewed it as it all coming from one side. I think that our current Poet Laureate in particular has used the platform to be provocative at times, and I have personally very much valued that. I haven't seen it, like I said, as being one-sided or the other, just it gets me thinking. And that's why I engage in the arts, is because I like how it makes me reflect. But I'm whether the Poet Laureate comes and gives a poet every 2 weeks, or whether they do it on certain occasions. Certainly for me, the most powerful time that we had a poem from the Poet Laureate was at the dinner that we had with the St. Mary's Band Council. And I don't know if any of my colleagues recall the poem that she read at that time, that she wrote herself, and that she read, and it was extremely powerful. And so I think on occasions like that, where, they had an elder there who did a ceremony, and Jenna Lynn read a poem on behalf of the city, and I thought it was very powerful. I think I agree. I'm more inclined to be viewing these things as 2 separate. What is the role of our Poet Laureate? Let's look at those terms of reference. Maybe we go back to the original job description that didn't require a bi-weekly reading. That is new as of this one. We might, maybe there's an opportunity there. As for the moment of reflection, I think it's imperative, actually, that we do that at the beginning of every meeting. I know that we all run in here from heaven knows where. Some of us are running from our jobs, running from our kids, running from putting on supper, running from who knows, and we get here, it's like plunk, and we just put our stuff down. And I think it's nice that for 30 seconds or for 1 minute, we just all kind of enter this space together. I really value that, and I know that the data, as Councillor Erickson points out, the data indicates that that's just good practice to everyone to enter a common mind space as you're entering a meeting. So I really like the moment of reflection. I'm really open to thinking of what that is. When I hear we should do different things every couple of weeks, all I think of is the extremely overtaxed Angela Watson, who is going to be responsible for finding a new person every 2 weeks. So I'm a little nervous about doing that, but whether we have that as part of this meeting or not, I think it's important that we have cultural celebrations frequently. But what's most important for me is that we have this moment of reflection at the very beginning of the meeting to all come into this space together, the same headspace.
Thank you. Okay. John McDermott. Well, you can wait. Well, he's already spoke, so I'm going to go to people that haven't spoke. Councillor Grandy and McGarity after that.
Oh, thank you, Worship. I purposely sort of sat back and listened to everybody to understand what the thoughts are on the moment of reflection, and also I knew some of the cultural laureate would come up and some of that. I'm of the mind very similar to Councillor Dara. I can't believe I'm saying that, but I am, based on the fact that some of the rhetoric that's come out on social media accuses us of racism, of not understanding diversity and that. And I think having a more inclusive and diverse discussion as part of that moment of reflection, maybe not every 2 weeks, but every once in a while, would not hurt to have, St. Mary's or Black Lives Matter or others to come in and give us a 5-minute, thing about our society. And it's about, making us understand more about the diversity within our community going forward. And I, the Poet Laureate was never meant to be every 2 weeks. And I agree with you, Councillor Rogers, so, looking at that, and I reviewed it as well, and it was never intended to be that way. And I think what happened by default was when prayer left and we went to a moment of reflection, we thought we got to fill the slot of some sort. And I think that was kind of the a decision we made at the time because of that. So I guess I'm not going to speak any longer, but I'm under the same kind of thought as my colleague about, the Poet Laureate would come in every once in a while and do special events or at a certain period of time. But also that we, and I know you're talking about taxing our cultural advisor or cultural person on staff, but, I think understanding diversity in our community would be very, very good for this council, next council, any council going forward. So that's where my head's leaning. Thanks.
Thank you. I'd like to just throw a comment in. I remember the prior principal at FHS said there were 63 nationalities represented at Fredericton High School. That's a long ways from what it was like 30, 40 years ago. So there's a lot of culture and diversity in the city that we're not even aware of. So there's opportunities along that line, if that's what council wanted to do. Councillor McGarity.
Thank you. Look, I'm divided. Look, I have no problem with the poems. Not, I think it's democracy at its best. But I guess when you look at reflection as opposed to something else, I don't mind having a Poet Laureate come in, drop your poem, and then stand back. Don't comment. I think Poet Laureate's job is whatever they choose to say is drop it and stand back. Now it's going to be up to council to decide if they want to have a debate. So then it goes from a reflection to a debate, and that's where some of the problems are. So, and I don't know if they're even problems, but I mean, if we take it from reflection to debate, if somebody wants to choose to say words, that's within this circle here. They're there to open our minds, and if we choose to talk about it, that's fine. If we don't, we go under our business. But I don't expect a Poet Laureate to come in here and give their side of the version. Their job is to give us a poem to make us think, and then stand back. So I think going forward, I think if we do keep the Poet Laureate, is that we use that way of thinking. Your job is throw a poem in front of us, make us think. If we want to comment, then it's between the people who sit here. So then for reflection to debate. So thank you.
Councillor Dara, then we'll take it to our...
I do want to speak.
Oh, I know you do. Yeah. Well, okay, your turn next because you haven't spoke yet. Thank you, Councillor
Dara. Look, there are 2 points in this conversation. One of them was, do we want a moment of reflection? And 2, do we want what do we want to do with that? I think to me, it's clear that on that first point, the moment of reflection is something that that council isn't prepared to get away from. And since we already diverted from that first point to the second point in terms of the value of having the Poet Laureate to the city, I don't think there's any question really that role is important to us as a council. Is that not on? Council committee, that sort of stuff, to the community and that sort of thing. I guess to me, really, the question is what's the way forward? And I think, look, I apologize. One of the things that I should have done was frame this actually from the context of where Angela is right now, listening to this conversation online, And really, she's started putting together the call for artists for the next round. Gentleman is up in, what is it, January?
End of January.
January. So I think it's a good conversation that we're having right now. Whether it's going to be the poet laureate coming in every 2 weeks for that meeting. Really, one of the things that I wanted to point out, and I think it was what Councillor Rogers brought up, when you look at the other obligations and roles and responsibilities from other municipalities, we are the only one who has that every 2 weeks coming in. It was not something, I think we can all agree, that was necessarily planned. It happened, and we liked it, and then said, hey, let's go for it. But to me, really, in good conscience, I don't think that we can expect the poet laureate to be coming every 2 weeks. It's a huge commitment. It's a huge obligation, either for the poet laureate to be here. So, and if we are going to have that obligation, then $3,000 as compensation is not going to be enough. So I think there needs to be a broader conversation after that, but I just wanted to put that out there. Again, I happen to be the placeholder in facilitating this conversation. So I'm trying to guide as well as possible, and maybe just in consideration at this point, I think everyone's had an opportunity to go around the table, speak to it. Can we agree that we want the moment of reflection? I mean, really, just, yeah. Do we agree that we really need to look at what that moment of reflection looks like, and whether it's the poet laureate or another component, and perhaps just leave it at that point for right now? I think we've heard everyone. Staff has heard the conversation. Angela has heard the conversation. I think it gives her pause in terms of she's going to need to figure this stuff out before the next call goes. If we don't have a poet laureate for 6 months until the next council comes in, I don't think that's a terrible thing. I think it's an important position for the community. And it could be like the case with Ian Letourneau, that his 2-year stint was actually extended, if I remember correctly on that. So it'd be fair to say, like right now, I had the sense that we've had a good conversation. Let it go back to Angela she's not getting 100% direction from it. It's not explicit, but I think that there's enough out of that conversation that she understands that that moment of reflection needs to be, how that's filled is one thing, and that will be reflected on the role of the poet laureate in terms of either with council or just with the city. Yeah. So are we good? Are we good with that?
I think you summed it up quite well, Councillor. I mean, I think that was where the discussion was, and there wasn't 100% consensus on everything, but the consensus was the way you summed it up. So, so we'll have to come back to, staff will have to come back to council and in due course, guided by our CAO with, on timing, so that with a new proposal, if it's new, and with a time frame. Right?
Okay, so actually on that point, Angela, I know that you're tuned in. Really just a simple question. Do you feel that you have a good sense of how this conversation is so that you can look at this issue going forward?
Yeah, I think we'll have it more date.
Your microphone's kind of broken up, so it doesn't give us a lot of confidence.
You sound like an adult from Peanuts.
We couldn't really hear you, Angela, but I think you said
yeah.
Yes. So we'll get there'll be enough assistance for you after this meeting from some of the staff that heard it as well to help you on that one. Okay?
Okay, great.
Good. Thank you, everybody. That is the end of our, sorry, Councillor Keenan?
Oh, can I?
Councillor Rogers.
I was just going to add to that conversation. I don't know what Angela was going to say, and I have been her with that weird sound thing. It's very awkward. I think she probably did have a sense of, direction. But I will say how that happens. She works with the jury. So the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee might talk about it a little bit more based on this information. As well, there's a jury that would have been working with her as the terms of reference in the job description were established. She'll probably go back to them. But I think what I know of that group is that probably everyone, you know, it's just a matter of looking what's happening in the other cities. You can see what is standard for poet laureates in other cities. I would not surprise me if the committee were inclined to follow the, you know, look at best practices in other areas. So, so everyone together will get that figured out.
Okay, good. So, thank you. That's the end of this this open meeting. But as soon as Councillor Keenan has something else to offer.
No, after the discussion, because I just wanted to commend Jenna Lynn, because we do like to mention when people do good things in our community. And I noticed on the weekend she was spearheading some efforts to look for a member of the cultural community, I'll say, and did a lot of work to organize that. So I think she's to be commended for, you know, for giving her time to help perhaps a fellow person that hopefully we can locate. And I know there's been a lot of thought and discussion about that individual, but all that to say, I thought it was great that she reached out and organized that.
Good. Thank you for those comments. Councillor McGarity.
Very quickly, look, I don't care what, frankly, on something like this, I don't care what other cities are doing. I didn't sign up to, you know, you look at cities that are leaders, cities that watch things happen, and cities that ask HE double hockey sticks, what happened? Well, I don't want to be either one of the last two. I want to be involved in being a leader. So I think we have something special here. We just have to talk about it more. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to be something special. We can set our city aside as a leader. Thank you.
Thank you.